Sugar. It's funny the things that come back to ya after all these years. Sometimes it's just a smell. Like this morning, I was making myself a good ol' cup of jasmine tea, like I always do. And as that steam came driftin' up, well, it hit me, that same sweet, sharp scent we used to get in those little cafes down in the Mission, back in the 70s. Mercy, I haven't thought of that place in years, but just like that, I was right back there again. And then this old record I had playin', Joni Mitchell, helped me start it up. Oh my, well, that really did it. Next thing I know, I'm sittin' here, tea goin' cold, thinkin' 'bout one particular afternoon in '74. And child, lemme tell ya, that day nearly changed the whole course of my life. You see, not many folks know this, not my kids, not even my bridge gals, but there was a time I came this close to landin' myself in jail. And I ain't talkin' 'bout some silly little parking ticket, oh no. Now darlin', for I'd get too deep in my ramblin', if you're enjoyin' this little trip down memory lane, why don't you go on and tap that lil OL like button or leave me a comment. Goodness knows, I do love hearin' from folks. And if you feel like stickin' round, well, hit that subscribe thing so you won't miss the rest of this story. Alright now, where was I? Oh yes. See, San Francisco back then, 1974, it was a wild, hummin' place. Streets buzzin' with color, sounds, people marchin' for this cause or that. Love, peace, change, it was all in the air, like perfume and pot smoke mixin' together. And me? I was just this young spitfire of a gal, 27, divorced, workin' the odd decorating job here and there, waitin' tables at a cafe down on Haight. Life was messy, beautiful, unpredictable. We thought we could change the world with art and music and a lil righteous protestin'. But lemme tell ya, back then, you had to be careful. The cops weren't exactly fond of us free-thinkin' types. One wrong place, one wrong crowd, that's all it took. And honey, one gray afternoon, I found myself in exactly the wrong place, at exactly the wrong time. Why does it still sit heavy on my heart? I suppose because that was the day I realized how close a person can come to losin' everything over nothin' more than idealism and bad luck. I've carried that little secret tucked away all these years. But today, well, something tells me maybe it's time to finally tell the truth. So grab your tea or coffee if that's your fancy and sit a spell. 'Cause what I'm about to share, let's just say, it ain't your usual Sunday story. Well now, if we're gonna start at the beginning, I suppose I oughta take you back just a lil further. You see, I wasn't born in San Francisco. No sir. I grew up in a tiny town up in Northern California, not too far from Redding. One of those places with dusty streets and wide front porches, where everybody knew everybody's business and life moved a good deal slower. My daddy ran a little hardware store and my mama, well, she was the heart of the house. She could bake a pie so good it'd make you cry. I was the youngest of three, with two big brothers who teased me something fierce, but always looked out for me. Back then, the world felt safe. Small, but safe. Summer days were spent running barefoot through the fields, catchin' grasshoppers and stringin' wildflowers in my hair. I'd sit out under the big oak in the backyard with a book, losin' myself in stories about far-off places and big adventures. And oh, how I dreamed. Even as a little girl, I always believed the world was bigger than our little town, and I just knew, somehow I'd find my way to it. I reckon I was always a bit of a dreamer. Mama used to say I had my head in the clouds more often than not, but I believed, deep down, that kindness was the most important thing, that if you were good to folks, they'd be good to you. And that no matter what, people always came back, came home. That's just how I saw the world. I held on to that feelin' for a long time. Now, fast forward a little bit, I was 17 when I first laid eyes on San Francisco. My stars, it was like stepping onto another planet. The colors, the noise, the smells, coffee, sea salt, a bit of gasoline from the streetcars. I remember standing on Market Street, my suitcase in one hand and my sketchbook in the other, staring up at all those tall buildings. My heart was racing, something fierce. I'd come to the city with big dreams. Wanted to be an artist, you know. Paint the world as I saw it. Maybe even make something of myself. I was young, wide-eyed, and more than a little naive. Didn't know a soul in town, but that didn't bother me none. Back then, I figured the world was full of friendly faces just waiting to be met. Life wasn't always easy in those first years. I scraped by, taking odd jobs, doing window displays, helping in little art shops, waiting tables. But oh, the city had a rhythm to it. You could feel it humming under your feet. The art scene was alive, murals on alley walls, poets in the coffee houses, music pouring out of every doorway. It was a good time to be young and full of hope. And me? I still believed that kindness could change things. That protesting for peace, for love, for justice, well, that mattered. We thought we could shape the world into something better. And so I found my place among that wild, beautiful crowd. Artists, musicians, free spirits of every sort. We'd sit up late, talking about dreams and plans, swap in ideas over cheap wine and cigarettes. It all felt so big, so important. And maybe in a way it was. But looking back now, with all these years gone by, I can see we were just kids. Kids with fire in our hearts, not always mindful of the dangers we were dancing around. And child, that's where this story truly begins. It was a chilly spring afternoon when it all began, though I surely didn't know it at the time. The fog was rolling in off the bay, just like it always did come April. I'd finished my shift at the little cafe on Haight, pockets jingling with a few tips, and was just wandering along, talking in the sights, folks on roller skates, kids with guitars, posters taped to every lamppost. And that's when I met her, Lila. She was standing in front of one of those little hole-in-the-wall bookstores, wearing this long, patchwork coat and a scarf tied up in her hair. Her arms were full of books, and she looked like she'd just stepped out of one of those protest posters. There was something about her sharp eyes, wide smile, full of life. I don't rightly know why, but my heart gave a little jump when she looked over at me. "Hey," she said, all casual, "you look like you could use a good read." And, just like that, we started talking. Lila was a few years older than me, bold as brass, and knee-deep in all kinds of activism. She spoke about marches and meetings, about changing the system and standing up for what's right. She had this way about her, made you feel like you mattered, like you could be part of something bigger. Now back then, I was still pretty green when it came to all that. I believed in peace, sure. I'd drawn up posters for a few rallies, passed out flyers now and then. But I wasn't what you'd call deeply involved. Lila, though, she was the real deal. And something about the way she talked, the fire in her eyes, well, I felt it lighten a spark in me too. We got to meetin' for coffee, then for late-night talks. She'd tell stories about protests down at the Civic Center, about poets and professors and folks who were risking everything for their beliefs. She invited me to a gathering one night, said it was just a small meetup at a friend's apartment. Good folks, safe space, she told me. And though I couldn't quite explain it, my heart was thumping something fierce. I felt like I was stepping towards something important. I didn't know what yet, but deep down I knew this was gonna change things. I remember standing in front of my little mirror before I left that night, brushing out my hair, trying to steady my nerves. I couldn't have said why, but I just felt this pull, like the wind had shifted. I told myself it was just curiosity. But now, after all these years, I know better. It was fate, plain and simple. That night would set the whole story in motion, the one I'm telling you now. And oh honey, if only I'd known what was comin'. Things didn't stay simple for long, no sir. After that night with Lila, I thought maybe I'd found a place where I belonged. But life, well, life has a funny way of throwin' curveballs when you least expect it. You see, San Francisco in the mid-70s wasn't just about peace and love. There were darker clouds hangin' over the city too. The city was changin', tensions were risin', and the folks in charge weren't exactly pleased with all the marchin' and shoutin'. And me? I was just tryin' to find my way, caught in the middle of it all, not knowin' who to trust or what to believe. Soon enough, I started hearin' whispers, cops patrollin' the neighborhoods harder, raids on apartments where activists gathered, friends disappearin' for a night or two. The free spirit I'd met, the wild energy of the city, it felt like it was slowly gettin' strangled by fear. One afternoon, I got a call from Lila, voice low and hurried. "They're watchin', they're lookin' for anything," she said. "Be careful, will ya?" I hung up feelin' a chill that settled deep in my bones. What was I gettin' myself into? At work, things got tense too. The cafe where I waited tables wasn't just a place for coffee anymore. It was a battleground of opinions. Some folks whispered about those troublemakers, others tried to keep things quiet. I could see the looks from some customers, the suspicion, the judgment. I felt like I was wearing a big OL target on my back, and I couldn't shake the feeling that soon, the trouble would come knockin' at my door. And then there was my family. My mama. Bless her heart, she worried something fierce. She didn't understand why I was so wrapped up in all this political nonsense. "Why can't you just settle down, find a nice man, and live a quiet life?" she'd ask, eyes filled with both love and fear. I tried to explain, tried to make her see why it mattered, but it was like talking to the wind. That made me feel lonelier than I ever thought possible. I started doubting myself. Was I doing the right thing? Was my fire just reckless youth? Sometimes, when the nights got too quiet, I'd sit alone and wonder if I was making a mistake that'd cost me everything. But darlin', I didn't give up. No ma'am. Lila and the others were my lifeline. They reminded me that sometimes you gotta stand up even when you're scared, even when it feels like the whole world's against you. But oh, the fear, the shame. There were nights I cried into my pillow, feeling like I'd stepped too far out of line, like maybe I'd ruined my chances at a peaceful life. I kept that turmoil locked up tight. People don't expect a lady of a certain age to have this kind of wild storm churnin' inside her. But I did. And that storm was just getting started. I remember that day as clear as the sky on a crisp autumn morning, though it was anything but peaceful. The clock seemed to stop ticking the moment the knock came at my door, hard, urgent, and full of cold authority. I stood frozen, heart hammering so loud I was sure the neighbors could hear it too. Those officers didn't come for a friendly chat. No ma'am, they came with orders, and the weight of it crushed down on me like a stone. I'd barely had time to collect my breath before they started asking questions, looking through my things, eyes sharp and unyielding. It felt like the whole world had shifted on its axis, and I was spiraling out of control. The place I'd thought was a safe harbor, my little apartment, my sanctuary filled with sketches and dreams, was no longer mine. There, tucked away in a dusty corner, lay the banned pamphlets and posters we'd been so careful to hide. I never thought that lending a hand to friends who believed in something bigger could lead to this. But there it was, evidence that tied me to the protests, to the rebellion the powers wanted to crush. I was stunned. I felt like I'd been caught in a whirlwind, one too wild to escape. I remember looking around the room, seeing my life unpacked and examined like some criminals, and thinking, How did it come to this? My dreams, my hopes, my fight for change suddenly seemed like dangerous crimes. I was scared. Oh, I was scared in a way I'd never known before. Not just for myself, but for my family, for my children, for the quiet life I'd always hoped to protect. I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake, if my youthful fire had burned too bright and too reckless. And yet, amidst all that fear, there was a strange sort of clarity. In that terrifying moment, I understood something vital, that standing up for what you believe in sometimes means walking a fine line between courage and consequence. I felt the weight of that choice settle deep inside me. What would I sacrifice? How far was I willing to go? The officers left with warnings and threats hanging heavy in the air. I was shaken, but not broken. No, that day changed me. It marked the end of my innocence and the beginning of a tougher, wiser chapter. I lost a sense of safety, yes, but I gained a new understanding of who I was, not just a girl with dreams, but a woman shaped by struggle and resolve. It wasn't easy, honey. There were tears and long nights wondering if I'd made the right choices. But in the end, I held on to that spark inside me, that stubborn light that refused to be snuffed out. That day, I learned that sometimes the hardest battles are fought within, and the bravest hearts carry the deepest scars. And that, my dear, is the story I never thought I'd tell, until now. After all that storm had passed, there was a stillness that settled over my life like a thick fog. It wasn't the kind of silence that brings peace. No, it was heavy and full of echoes of what had been lost, and what could never quite be the same again. For a long while, I wandered through my days feeling like a shadow of the girl I used to be. The fire that had once burned so brightly now flickered low, and I found myself searching for meaning in the quiet moments between the noise. The city itself seemed different too. San Francisco had changed, or maybe I had. The streets that once buzzed with music and laughter felt colder, the colors a little less vivid. Folks moved a little quicker, eyes downcast, carrying their own invisible burdens. The cafes weren't quite as warm, the faces less familiar. I felt a deep ache of loneliness, not just for the friends I'd lost or the dreams that felt so far away, but for the innocence that had slipped through my fingers like sand. I'll be honest with you, my faith in people, in the goodness of the world, it took a mighty hard hit. I kept wondering how a place that promised freedom could turn its back so quickly on those who dared to dream different. How the very folks sworn to protect could become the ones to break you down. It was a bitter pill to swallow, and some days I still choke on it when the memories creep up. But life, she keeps on rollin', whether we're ready or not. I found myself retreating from the crowds, the protests, the fiery conversations. I took solace in simple things, tending to my balcony garden, sipping tea with my closest friends, getting lost in the melodies of those old records that reminded me of better times. It was a slow healing, like mend in a tear in a favorite dress. You don't rush it, you just patch it up stitch by stitch, day by day. I stopped talking much about those days. The story got tucked away, folded deep inside where only I could reach it. Sometimes I'd catch my own reflection and see the lines life had drawn on my face, the quiet strength born from all that loss and heartache. I wasn't the same girl who stepped off that bus in the Mission all those years ago, full of hope and fire. No, I was someone who had been tested and tempered, who'd learned the hard lessons of trust and resilience. And though there were moments of sorrow and doubt, there was also a new kind of peace. Not the kind that comes from victory or certainty, but from acceptance. From knowing that even in the darkest nights, the dawn still waits somewhere just beyond the horizon. So I held on to that promise of light, no matter how faint, and I carried it with me into the days ahead. Because that's all any of us can do, isn't it? Keep going, keep believing, even when the road's rough and the night's long. After what felt like an endless stretch of quiet and shadow, something unexpected stirred within me, a flicker of hope, soft and shy, like the first timid buds of spring pushing through the last patches of winter snow. It wasn't a grand event or a loud announcement, no sir. It came from a small kindness, a gentle reminder that life could still surprise you when you least expect it. One afternoon, while I was tending my balcony garden, I noticed a young mother struggling with her stroller outside my building. The wheels had caught on the cracked sidewalk, and she was looking flustered and exhausted. Without thinking twice, I stepped down to help her, offering a steady hand and a few words of encouragement. That simple moment, just reaching out to someone who needed it, lit a spark inside me. It reminded me that no matter how much life changes or how heavy the past may feel, there's always room for new beginnings. It was like the garden itself was speaking to me, showing me how even after the harshest winters, the earth could bloom again. And maybe, just maybe, so could I. I started to feel that old fire rekindling, slow and steady. It wasn't the wild blaze of my youth, but a steadier warmth, one born from hard lessons and quiet strength. I began sketching again, not for a protest poster or a rally, but just for myself. Little paintings of the flowers on my balcony, the streets I'd come to know so well, the faces of folks I passed every day. It felt good to create again, to find joy in the simple act of bringing beauty into the world. And then, there was a chance encounter that made a difference too. One of my old cafe customers, a kindly professor from a local college, spotted my sketches and invited me to join a community art project. It was a small thing, but it gave me purpose, a reason to step out and connect with others who shared my love for art and life. Suddenly, the city didn't feel quite so cold anymore. I realized I still had something to offer, stories to tell, art to share, wisdom to pass on. Most importantly, I began to forgive myself for the mistakes, the fears, the times I'd faltered. I saw that the path I'd walked, with all its twists and turns, was part of the person I had become. And that person, well, she was worth the love and kindness I'd been so ready to give others. It wasn't an easy road, and some days the doubts crept back in. But each morning, as I watched the sun rise over the bay, I found myself leaning into that hope a little more. Life had handed me a second chance, not to erase the past, but to build on it, to keep moving forward with open eyes and a tender heart. So here I am, darling, still dreaming, still growing, still learning that even after the darkest storms, the sun can shine again. And that's the most beautiful truth of all. It took me a long, long time to get here, to this quiet place inside where I could finally lay down the burdens I'd been carrying for decades. You see, the past, well, it's like a shadow that follows you, sometimes stretching long and dark, other times just a whisper at your heels. For years, I held on to the memory of that day, the fear, the almost heartbreak of losing myself to a world that didn't quite understand me. I carried it like a secret tucked away where no one else could find it. But secrets have a way of weighing heavy, don't they? And the heart can only hold so much before it needs to breathe. One afternoon, not too long ago, I found myself sitting on my balcony, the same one I'd tended for years, looking out over the city that had shaped me. The sun was setting and painting the sky with shades of gold and pink, and I felt a stirring inside, a quiet but fierce call for freedom from all that held me back. In my hands was an old box, dusty and worn, filled with keepsakes from that time long past, faded posters, letters, little drawings. For a moment, I just held them, letting the memories wash over me like a wave, some painful, some sweet. And then, with a deep breath that seemed to pull all the weight from my shoulders, I made a choice. I decided to let go. Not to forget, no, never forget, for those days shaped who I am, but to stop letting the past dictate the rest of my life. I chose to forgive myself for the mistakes, the fear, the times I'd been too scared to speak up or too proud to ask for help. I chose to forgive the world for its harsh judgments and cold shadows. That box, those memories, I gathered them all and set them gently on the edge of the balcony. And with a smile, bittersweet and full of grace, I let them go, one by one, into the breeze. Watching them catch the wind, fluttering away like autumn leaves, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. It was as if a chapter closed softly, and a new one began right there in the fading light. I told myself then, and I say it now to you, darling, I chose to live on. Without regrets. Without holding on to what could have been. Just on. I found peace not in errors in the past, but in embracing it, learning from it, letting it be a part of my story without letting it define me. It was a gift I gave myself, and I pray you'll find the courage to give yourself the same. Life is messy, it's full of twists and turns that sometimes leave us breathless and wondering if we'll ever find solid ground. But I stand here today with all my scars and stories, and I can say, I am whole. Not because I'm perfect, but because I've made peace with my journey. And that, honey, is a kind of freedom that's worth more than any treasure. So here's to choosing yourself, to letting go, and to the beautiful, unpredictable road ahead. Because in the end, we don't get to rewrite our past, but we sure as heck get to decide how we live what's left of our days. And I, for one, plan to live mine with an open heart and a steady hand. You know, after all these years, when I sit quiet and think about what I've been through, it ain't easy to put it all into words. But if there's one thing this long, winding road has taught me, it's that life ain't about perfection or never making mistakes. No, it's about how we pick ourselves up after the falls, how we carry the weight of our choices, and how we find peace with the paths we've taken, even the rocky ones. I used to believe that being strong meant never showing weakness or fear. But now I know better. Real strength is letting yourself be human. It's accepting the messiness, the heartbreak, the confusion, and still deciding to keep on going. Looking back, I see that those years in San Francisco, all that chaos and fear, they shaped me in ways I couldn't have understood at the time. They taught me about courage, not the kind you see in movies, but the quiet kind, the kind that whispers to you when you're alone and scared. I learned that sometimes, standing up for what you believe in don't come with a trophy or applause. Sometimes, it's just about holding onto your dignity when the whole world feels like it's turning against you. I also learned the power of forgiveness of others, and most importantly, of myself. For so long, I carried around guilt and shame for the choices I made, for the times I stumbled. But carrying that burden didn't help nobody, least of all me. When I finally let go of those heavy feelings, it was like a weight lifted off my chest, and I could breathe again. And honey, that's something I wish for everyone, to find a way to forgive themselves and move forward, no matter what their past looks like. One more thing I came to understand is that life doesn't wait for anyone. You can't stand on the sidelines hoping for the perfect moment to start living. If there's one truth I want to share, it's this. Maybe it's time for you to stop waiting, stop holding back out of fear, shame, or doubt. Life's too short to keep putting off the things that make your heart sing. Whether it's speaking your truth, chasing a dream, or simply reaching out to someone who needs you, the moment is now. So, my dear friends, if you're listening to my story, know this. Your past don't have to define you. Your mistakes, your struggles, they're part of your story, sure, but they ain't the whole book. You have the power to turn the page, to write the next chapter with courage, kindness, and grace. I'm not saying it'll be easy. Life rarely is. But it's worth it. Every step, every tear, Every hard lesson is worth it if it leads you to a place where you can look in the mirror and say, I am enough. I am whole. And that, honey, is the real beauty of living. It's messy, imperfect, and sometimes downright painful. But it's also filled with moments of joy, love, and hope, moments that remind us why we keep going, why we keep believing. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop waiting for life to be perfect and start living the one you've got. Because you deserve it. You really do. Well, here we are, darling, at the end of this little journey I've been sharing with you. It's a funny thing, isn't it? How the stories from way back can still hold so much weight in our hearts today. I hope you felt a little of what I've felt, the fear, the hope, the lessons wrapped up in those years gone by. But more than that, I hope you've come to see that this isn't just some tale from the past. No, ma'am, it's a story that lives on, breathing in the moments we have right now. Because the truth is, we carry our yesterdays with us, sure, but it's what we do today that shapes the rest of our days. I find myself thinking sometimes about the people we meet, the chances we take, and the love we hold on to, or sometimes, the love we let slip through our fingers. There's a question that's been lingering in my heart, and I want to ask you, do you believe true love should come back to you? I mean, really come back, not just in memories or dreams, but in a way that makes your heart skip a beat and your soul feel whole again. You see, there's a story I never told before about a man I once loved, someone who walked in and out of my life like a sudden breeze. We had dreams, hopes, and plans, but life pulled us apart, as it so often does. Yet sometimes, in the quiet moments, I swear I can feel his presence, like a soft whisper just beyond the edge of hearing. And I wonder, maybe, just maybe, he remembers me too. It's a thought that brings both a smile and a sigh, a reminder that love, real love, doesn't always follow the straight path we expect. It twists and turns, disappears and returns, teaching us about patience, forgiveness, and the courage to keep our hearts open even when the world feels heavy. So as you sit there, listening to my words, I want you to hold on to this feeling. The feeling that life stories, ours and others, aren't just chapters in a book that ends. They're living, breathing parts of who we are, shaping how we love, how we forgive, and how we move forward. Maybe you've got your own story, a memory or a love that still lingers, like a gentle song on a quiet evening. Maybe you're wondering if it's time to let go, or if there's still a chance for something beautiful to bloom again. Whatever you're feeling, whatever your heart's whispering, I hope you find the strength to listen and the courage to believe. And remember, darling, life's most precious gifts often come wrapped in mystery and grace. They don't always make sense, and they don't always arrive when we want them to, but they arrive all the same. Thank you for sitting with me, for listening to my story, and for sharing a piece of your time. I hope it's warmed your heart a little, as telling it has warmed mine. And if there's one thing I hope you'll take away, it's this. Love is never wasted. It leaves footprints on our souls, no matter how long ago the journey began. So tell me, from your heart, do you think true love should come back? And if it does, how will you know it's real? Sometimes, I like to think the answer is waiting just around the corner, in the next breath, or in a glance across a crowded room. And sometimes, just sometimes, I believe it's already found me again.